Hey YouTube, this is Ben Gessel. How's it going? I'm hoping that I'll be feeling better tomorrow. You never know about these things when you get sick. But my voice isn't quite as deep as it was in regarding being sick. It's a little bit takes a little bit more effort to speak. So I'm wondering if I'm gonna just be going through the making an initial effort to speak, and then the sound will come a little bit quick. You know what I mean. It's kind of like the still a vocal thing going on, but anyway. So this video I'm going to talk about Latin America and what I think about Latin Americans and people. And I'll also make another video after this one, I don't know, at some point about the Middle East and India and maybe other, like the Turks and stuff. But I mean, yeah, I'm going to try to get all the others, all the others of the world. And I'm just going to mention this right off the bat with Latin America. As you could probably guess, the majority of people I've known, I'm also going to include American Indians with this. So it's American Indians, or it's just people that lived in the New World before the Europeans came, etc. North, South America, I'm trying to avoid the term and Americans. Like some people don't like that term. So when I say American Indians, I don't just mean folks that lived in the United States and whatever. I'm talking about all Indians from North and South America, but I'm not talking about Indians in India. I know this is always sorry, folks. I'm just trying to specify who I'm talking about here. So everybody from like the Algonquin and the Neetsilik and the Eskimos and the Athabascans, all the way down to American Indians in Chile and Argentina, and I'm not quite as familiar with some of the names of those tribes, but certainly south of the Incans and stuff. Everybody in between. So let's start out with Latin Americans. And as you can probably guess, what I'm about to say, I've definitely known the most Mexicans. Overwhelmingly, numerically, in terms of who I've known in my life, Mexico and Mexican culture is very, very familiar. And we'll start with Mexico because Mexico is closest to the United States, and I am very familiar with Mexican culture. And I had a roommate who was Mexican for years, and I've known girls from Mexico. You know, um, I've known lots of folks that are members of my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that are Mexican. Um, like just like the Philippines and Polynesia, and uh, we'll just I mean, there's just a lot of Mormons in Mexico that are Mexican, and also other Latin American countries. So um, yeah, um, Mexico. Trying to think of what because it is so familiar and it's so easy to talk about. Yet at the same time, it's like I'd rather not talk about the things that everybody knows. I'd rather talk about my deeper impressions of what Mexican folks are like. And in a way, it's not easy to do because when you think about these folks, it does. I'm often very. My heart kind of melts. I'll put it that way. Um, and it's a similar. Well, I don't know. How can I put this? I I I just. I mean, with very few exceptions, you have to. I don't know if they call them cholos or gangsters. I haven't known very many people at all that I dislike that are Mexican. The overwhelming majority of people I've known from Mexico are awesome folks, and some are just celestial and just amazing people. And again, it's hard to think of some folks without getting a little bit emotional, because I want so many good things for them. I know what kind of people they are. I can feel what kind of people they are. So Mexicans are very close to my heart in general. I understand that the gangsters and the guys that want to be tough and everything in LA, they don't, maybe that's a different kind of thing. Right? I know you guys are trying to think of like movies like Nacho Libre, and you're trying to think of like all these folks that are in the pop culture and that are Mexican or Hispanic or whatever. And I know I know like there's a difference between Latinos and Hispanics. I understand the general difference there. I don't really want to spend too much time talking about a lot of stuff. Again, it's just I'd rather think about people I've known and what they're like. I mean, there's some just for example, I worked with a guy. In addition to a roommate I had after college who was Mexican, who I love dearly, and he's like a brother to me. I worked with a young guy, and he liked music that I didn't like, honestly. But I worked with a guy for half a year who was Mexican, and it was like awesome. I mean, like I understood exactly how he felt. Just it was so easy to just understand him. It's so easy to just okay, he's in a bad mood, which actually wasn't very often. Oh, he's getting tired of this job. Yeah, me too. Yeah, of course. I mean, we had a janitor. It was a janitor work job, and you know, I, and he was so friendly. He was so open, and uh, you know, I mean, you don't always get that from a lot of people. And I think one of the things about Mexico is that actually is more the what it's more of a commonality that people have. People are just more for real. They are more open. They're more friendly. They they're more engaging in a way. I hate to do this, but if I were to contrast Mexico with another country that's very different, I might pick North Korea. I'm sorry. Well, okay. What I'm trying to say is there are places, and maybe there's definitely some European countries like this too. I don't know, or areas of Europe that can be like this. There are some places in the world where people just won't want to talk to you. No matter who you try to talk to, it's going to be hard to make friends. That is not the way Mexico is, in my estimation. In Mexico, I do believe that people are a lot more friendly. And I love that. I mean, there's a music composer I've known who's Mexican. Basically, I'm talking about all these folks. They're basically, talking about Americans. It's always I don't know. It's always like you're Mexican, but you're also American. But whatever, it's like, I don't know. On some level, and I know everybody has different thoughts about this, but on some level, I mean, like, and also geographically, yeah, we're just right next to each other. And again, I know a lot of people test you about this, but it can be very like, okay, who's the American and who's the Mexican? It's like they are, we are so close together geographically. There are so many folks that are Mexican in the United States. I mean, there are more Mexicans, or there are more Hispanic folks than there are black folks. And so, in a way, although we tend to think of Americans as either being at least historically, as being white or black, in more recent times, it's increasingly very Hispanic, but also everybody else, like, Asian and Indian and stuff. But yeah, I mean, like, this is a country that's very familiar to a lot of people, especially in the Southwest and California. And man, I know, I certainly do know about a lot of the things that people don't like about a lot of Mexicans. And I don't need to even mention the legal immigrant thing. That doesn't even need to be mentioned. The Mexicans understand this very well. This is a very part of the other thing too about Mexico is that there's over 100 million people. I mean, there's probably like 100 I don't know, 150 million, whatever it is. It's a lot of folks, and the population is growing a lot. There are all these kinds of nations where this is, I don't know, big families. I don't know, but they're sometimes seen as being a little pesky that way, or Pakistan sometimes I think seen this way, but Pakistan is a very different country, of course, than Mexico. It's just I'm trying to think of with this. There are a lot of differences I know between different folks from Mexico. We all know that there's the Spanish white Mexicans or the European Mexicans or whatever, along with a pretty good number of Germans who emigrated to Mexico and that sort of thing. There's also these other similar folks that way. There's also, of course, folks who have more American Indian ancestry from Aztec, Maya, etc. tribes, Zapotec, all those guys. Or there's like mestizos, are both American Indian and European. And there's mulattoes that are both African and American Indian. And there's people who have all three, ancestries of they're American Indian, they're black, and they're white. And there's probably some other stuff, folks I can't think of off the top of my head, along with that, there's a lot of different regional differences I'm pretty familiar with. Certainly the big difference being Yucatan Peninsula and more Mayan arena versus the drier northwest. And I guess the middle of the country is kind of where the two come together. But Mexico City, I tend to see as being a little bit more like the north part of Mexico in a way. It's just Aztec country. Mayan culture and people being more, I think, also like Central American. All the Central American nations. It's just a lot more tropical, lush type, climate and everything. So, anyway. So there's a lot of differences everybody has. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that tie everyone together. And one of the biggest things is, again, the way you feel, the way I felt when I talked to a lot of folks in Mexico. And believe me, there are folks that are Mexican that, United States, that are definitely very American, very much so, that in some respects, to me, don't feel... There's a little bit different feeling about some of these folks than, I don't know. I just know that there is kind of a American cool thing, or I think this is just across the board. But this is especially the case for Mexico versus the United States. There is kind of this America's cool, Mexico is kind of whatever vibe. And so I understand that is probably something that affects a lot of folks that are Mexican. They don't want to be seen. I don't know. Again, this is complicated in a way, emotionally, but try to explain. I've seen. I don't need to see movies. I understand this firsthand, really, but yeah, there's a movie again about a math teacher in Los Angeles that is, I don't know, you guys probably know which movie I'm talking about. Stand and Deliver or something. I mean, there's kind of a expectation, or I should say culture. There's culture among Mexican young men to be a tough guy, or to be... what am I trying to think about? How can I put this? I understand it, but I don't. It's almost like you have regional variations of this. It's a different kind of thing in LA than it is in Chicago somewhat, but then it's different in Eastern Washington and in the Mountain West. But it's a little bit like no one wants to be a sissy boy. No Mexican young men want to be a sissy boy. And if you're a sissy boy, it's, yeah. And it's really no different than any other area of the world. It's just, this is kind of a thing I've noticed in Mexican culture. And so you get some gangs that are into this, how tough are you kind of thing. To contrast this with, say, African American culture, a lot of black folks, to be honest, and I'll just straight it out. Again, you have some variations from area to area. But again, just in contrast, a lot of black folks will talk about someone being more or less black. And this is just African American. Just African American. And African's different. It's just African American. So this person acts more black, or this person acts more white, or this person is different, or whatever. And this is kind of a high school thing, right? There's kind of these groups and cliques and things. And with a lot of black kids, if you're not as much of a tough guy, in a way, yeah. I guess, I don't know. I don't know. I understand what I'm trying to say. It's hard to put into words. But what I'm trying to say, I think, is that when I was younger, I saw these different groups of black kids in a very similar light that I saw everyone else. They were white, for the most part. White kids, European kids, whatever, European American. We definitely had our groups in high school, which I hated. And it's pretty much the same deal with a lot of the black kids. With Mexican kids, similar, but there was not as many of them in my high school. I mean, must have been a handful. I don't know how many, but not as many. So it wasn't like there was as big of a group. It wasn't as big of a presence. Now everybody took Spanish, or a lot of people took Spanish as an elective class, but it wasn't like. And it's different in Eastern Washington. It's different. It depends on where you live. And if you have more folks that are Hispanic, then it's going to be different, right? But these three groups, white, European American, black or Afro American, and Hispanic, I'll say Mexican, or we'll just say Hispanic American, they're the first three groups that come to my mind, though, when I think of when I was younger, how things were, and how people were different groups. Now, you might think, where are the Asians? Yeah. I'll just be honest here. The Asians tended to fall into just a few groups. 1, brainy kids. 2, music and orchestra nerds and kids. And 3, everyone else. So, I mean, but the overwhelming majority of Asian kids I was friends with and everything were working hard, and they were trying to get A's in their classes. And yeah, so, I mean, it wasn't like, it was just different. If they were a jock, they were also really hardworking in their classes. And so it was different in, again, with white, Hispanic, black high school dynamics. You have the jocks, the preppies, the geeks, and the dorks, or the nerds, the cheerleaders, and the popular, again, I mentioned preppies, and I guess stoners and goths and emos, and after that point, it's some other folks. I don't know. So, but that's American high school stuff, which I've always hated. I always hate that. I hated it with a passion when I was younger. I still hate it now. But I understand that it's still a thing, kind of. So, why did I mention all this with Latin America? Well, again, I'm going to make another video. It's going kind of long here, but Mexico and Mexicans, I think, understand these groups better than most folks, especially if they're the United States. But if they're not the United States, yeah. I don't know. Again, I'm going to come back to what I was saying before. You just get a real, is an unmistakably friendly and familiar feeling you get when a lot of times you're talking with folks from Mexico. And if you get to be good friends with them, it's not hard to be. It's not as hard to make friends with folks from Mexico a lot of times, and I love that about Mexico. But I really should be pressing on to other countries here. So I know that you guys have all kinds of other things, good and bad, to say about Mexico. Or think about. I understand. I just again prefer to think of Mexico in more positive, definitely more positive light. But I know there's a lot of different people. It's a huge country. I know, but anyway, I can't mention very much about Central America. I've only known a few people, just a few people from Central America. One guy from Panama, I was just acquaintance. And another lady is a member of my church from Nicaragua, and hardly anybody else from the Caribbean. So I'm going to skip right on to some other ones. I know, small countries. Now, I've known some folks from Venezuela and Colombia, and I love this area. I definitely could live in this area. I love the ladies there. They're great. I know. And I just love the culture. I know the drug central. I know there's a crazy drug, that the angel trumpet thing. It can be a very nutty place to live. I've heard, and again, crazy things about. It's not so much Caracas. Caracas is probably okay. Love Venezuela. It's more Bogota. You hear the crazier things about, but I think in general, when it comes to South America, it's just like you're talking about. You see this in Central America somewhat, but you're talking about, or South or Caribbean. You're talking about a lot of rogue with politics and governments. You're talking about a lot of rogue. Just we want to do things our own way. The heck with the United States government, and there's some of that sentiment in places amongst some people, sure, but no, I think very positively. I mean, but a lot of people say, a lot of Colombians and Venezuelans are very quick to point out differences between themselves and say Mexicans in particular. My experience, and I understand that. Well, I tend to see South Americans in general as being a little bit more mellow, a little bit more mellow and a little bit less emotional compared to Mexicans. I love the emotions of Mexicans. It's something I like the most about Mexican folks. The sensitivity to so many things that are spiritual in nature. That's what I get emotional about myself. And I know that, but in South America, it seems like it's a little, they try to make a little more of an effort maybe to not be as so emotional. But, there's all the different personalities and things, and that's a generalization. But my experience with folks from Colombia and Venezuela is they're a little bit less intense that way. So that means that sometimes you have to dig a little deeper to know how they're feeling about things. But I don't know. It just depends on the person. But it's easy to feel very relaxed around a lot of these folks. And again, I haven't known too many of them, but I've had one music student in particular had Colombian ancestry, I think. Another guy I knew in Lutheran Summer Music Festival, also like a long time ago. His parents are, he's Colombian. And so I'm going to press on here, but again, good things to say about Venezuela and Colombia. Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, Uruguay, I don't know, you don't really pronounce the G. A lot of these smaller countries, and of course that goes up saying French Guiana, Suriname, and Guyana. I have not known anybody from Guyana, French Guiana, or Suriname. Sorry. Nobody from really most in the area of the Caribbean again. Sorry. That's just, Ecuador, no. I've known one lady from Peru in particular, at least one. And Bolivia, not so much. Nobody really from Uruguay or Paraguay. And really nobody from Chile either, although I heard a lot of great things about folks from Chile. And Argentina, I've mostly when it comes to the southernmost part of South America, a lot of what I've heard comes from, of course, missionaries in my church that went to those places. to serve missions. That's usually what when you talk about Argentina and Chile. Other than, you hear about things like neo-Nazism in Argentina and stuff, and there's little things here and there, that are about music or about whatever. But I have great things to think about all these areas. I like every single country here we're talking about, pretty much. Now, Brazil, ending with Brazil here, boy, that you're basically talking about, in some respect or other, you're talking about not. There's just there's what can I mean. It's just too hard to sum up. What I think about Brazil in the next 5 minutes or so. I had a brother that served a mission there, along with cousins, church mission. The Amazon is completely different from the coast, and a lot of the American Indian tribes in the Amazon. I'm sure they're great folks, but these are cultures that I'm not as familiar with. And they're also, and I'm gonna have to make another video about American Indians. Sorry, I'm running out of time here, but so maybe I'll mention more about those guys here in the next video. But Brazilians, I love Brazilians in general. I just know there's a lot of you hear all kinds of things. Like there's the really cultured, nice, sensitive guys like Tom Jobim, or Portuguese sometimes escapes me how to pronounce some things, but I've heard of Astrid Gilberto, or these musicians, bossa nova guys. But there's many other. I mean, Sergio Mendes and things. There's a lot of musicians I've heard of from Brazil, along with Heitor Villa-Lobos, classical composer. And you hear about a lot of these great people. My brother went to an mission to Brazil, describing how people are. A lot of soccer players, a lot of little boys love to play soccer, and he was in the area that was south of the Amazon Delta, somewhat, but is somewhat in the interior of the country, at least a little bit further away from the coast, but not too much, not too far from the coast. But every area of Brazil is a little different. It sounds like a lot of kids growing up in Brazil, they just don't have a whole lot for the most part. So, soccer is a big deal. A lot of boys like to play soccer, and there's a lot of sports, and then a lot of just block parties, or people just play music really loud, and people just dance for the fun of it, and that's just the way things are. And gangs are everywhere, but it's a different gang culture somewhat, where I don't know. It sounded like it was really just every single day was a fun adventure. You never knew what to expect, but it was a little bit crazy. Yeah, that's my impression I had of Brazil from how my brother described the country. And again, I had never been there, and I haven't really known anybody from Brazil. I just tend to think pretty highly of the people there. I just know they have a lot of things. Going on in Brazil. I mentioned there's a emotional, spiritual element, particularly with American Indians, that I'm talking about with all these folks, Mexico, all the way into South America. Caribbean's a little different, right? Somewhat. But we're talking about people with American Indian ancestry. In many respects, you're talking about cultures and peoples that tend to put a lot of stock in things like emotions and supernatural things and spiritual things, and yeah. So you get a lot of, yeah. I'm gonna have to mention this in the next video, I think, but people tend to take certain experiences that are maybe a little bit scary more seriously, that are American Indian or Latin American or Hispanic. That's my experience. This is something they take a little more seriously, depending on the nature of someone's experience about something. it's more of a real thing. In West Africa, I know voodoo is kind of a big thing. This is a similar, different kind of cultural thing, but you get an idea what I'm talking about. In Eurasia, in some respects, at least Western Europe and the more developed areas, there are places where these sorts of subjects that people are curious about, but maybe they don't take it quite as seriously on an everyday basis or a day-to-day basis. And Brazil, like Mexico, American Indian folks, Brazilians more in the Amazon, more American Indian ancestry. Again, they do tend to take some of these things like dreams, nature of dreams, shadows, animals, cross your path. It's not the sort of thing that the cultures tend to take these things a bit more seriously. And it varies from tribe to tribe and people to people, but okay, I'm gonna wrap up this video. More of it. Take care. Bye.